Join us by the fireside for our evening tales of true life's strange experiences with things that lie beyond the veil of the known and into the misty depths of the mysterious and unknown. The creature in the mattress. So this story happened in the early 80s when I was about 5 years old. At the time, we lived in Idaho. My brother and I slept in the same room. I'll explain the layout of our room, which was somewhat typical, so you get an idea of perspective. Both our beds were positioned where our heads were against the same wall. My bed was kind of tucked against one side of the room, while my brother's bed hugged the adjacent wall. Just like an equal sign, but spaced about 5 to 7 feet apart. We had a nightlight plugged in between us. You know, those ones in the 80s that produced that kind of dingy orange glow. Anyway, one night I woke. What I would guess to be maybe around 4 a.m. or something. I was gazing off towards the side of my brother's bed, and I was looking at nothing in particular, just kind of laying there awake. I found myself suddenly kind of mesmerized, is the only way I can describe it. The fabric on the side of my brother's mattress began to morph and bulge out. Being curious, I just continued to watch. I wasn't scared, more just like, what the hell? Within seconds, I began to notice facial features begin to form. A face was literally coming out of the side of the mattress. Still not really being scared as I just continued to watch, I saw the features becoming more and more detailed. One way to picture this is imagine a sheet of latex just pulled kind of taut and press your face into it. Now imagine how this would look to someone on the other side. So within moments, I just found myself staring at this. It's going to sound kind of made up, but I promise you, this is what I remember. There was a smooth, brown, wrinkled humanoid face that was bulging out of the side of my brother's mattress. Maybe to ear level or something like that. Instead of human skin, it had skin that had kind of a sheen to it. It was sort of oily and smooth looking. It was not unlike what you'd see maybe on a brown frog or salamander or something like that. It had a typical human-like mouth, which was open slightly agape with sharp teeth jutting from the roof of its mouth. Its eyes also looked human in shape, but the iris was yellow in color with a black, cat-like slit for a pupil in the center. This thing's eyes were locked onto me. It had to be something animate and conscious, but I didn't get any feeling of it being fully aware. No impressions that it was evil or anything of the sort. The eyes had what some would call a 1,000-yard stare to them. That look when someone is kind of lost in thought or daydreaming. Like there is someone present but not quite all the way. But regardless, this thing is looking directly into my eyes. My mind began to race. The only way I can explain it was like this. For one, I was really young, so I just initially perceived this as something unusual and observed it with some kind of level of curiosity. Then this evolved into a frantic attempt to make a mental connection to what I was seeing and something that I could relate to in the physical world. Tearing through my mental file cabinets for connection, after a few seconds of this, my mind came up with this sort of no match conclusion, like a mental form of what you get with no results found on a search engine. This is when this thing hit me. That super unknown triggered an extreme fear in me. The kind of fear that just grabs you. It takes the wind out of you, and it's like a knife being driven into the core of your soul. I was shaking. There was adrenaline, absolute horror. I covered my head with my blankets and I tried not to breathe. Not wanting to show any signs of life, I remember the thought crossing my mind to possibly take another look, just to verify, but I was quite confident in what I witnessed the first time and did not feel a second look was going to do anything to benefit the situation. It was there, and it was real. That I was sure of. I was totally and utterly freaked out. Unable to go back to sleep, I just lay there, kind of frozen, until I heard my dad getting up for work. Eventually, I was able to just hop out of bed without looking, and I raced into the hall and met my dad in the kitchen, where I remember frantically trying to explain what I saw. I even grabbed a piece of paper to which I tried to draw what I had just seen. He paid me no mind, and I remembered getting the typical, "Oh, that's strange, son. Anyhow, I gotta go to work," kind of vibe. A response I remember being prepared to get. To this day, I remember this incident vividly. I'm fully aware of, hallucinations associated with sleep paralysis, etc. I have had them, and this was nothing of the sort. I was fully mobile and was able to cover my head with my blankets and was not paralyzed. This would be the same situation in which I saw something else 10 years later. I'm not a religious person, nor was our house haunted as far as I knew. My brother doesn't have any weird dark vibes any more than the average person, and nor do I. So I think I can likely rule out some sort of demonic attachment. The origins of this experience still fascinate me, but still find it very unsettling. I have listened to countless stories and experiences, but I've never heard anyone having a similar experience. It manipulated material to manifest. This was incredibly bizarre and absolutely real, just in ways I don't think we understand. As I said, I'm not religious, even though this thing fits the stereotype exactly. A kind of textbook demon, perhaps? This was before I saw anything of the type on television, so I don't think my mind could have built this thing off memory. I tend to be a scientific minded guy and have always been that way. I'm very analytical and have always been that way. If it wasn't for this memory would have probably been lost in time or just blown off as my imagination. So I have no idea what it was, but absolutely want to know. Well, there are certainly some very strange experiences out there, and this is definitely one of them. But, sometimes we have to realize that perhaps the laws on the other side, if you want to call it that, are actually a little more fluid than they are here. And the creatures that come from there and the places there are much more, I don't know, I guess more flexible and because they seem to be able to change size easily and form and everything. So it's kind of interesting, It's like there's a different natural law where they come from, which our human mind is just not used to, and I guess we just don't understand it. We have nothing to compare it to here. Fascinating story. The hike. This happened in summer of 2016 when I was 16 years old. I was hiking with my dad and a family friend, and we were in Colorado. We were in the wilderness hiking up to Wetterhorn Peak. It was a full day's trip, roughly about 15 miles round trip. So I was jamming to my downloaded playlists during most of the time on my hikes while we are at the ridgeline about to make the final ascent to the peak. The terrain starts to get too technical for my dad, and he didn't want me to, go without him. So we waited overlooking the Fifth Valley that the mountain turns into. I was listening to my music, and then I thought I heard something. but I kind of disregarded it as part of maybe a track or something that went unnoticed to that point. So a moment passes and I hear the noise again. It kind of sounded like someone was hollering, but I can't really tell for sure. I mean, if it was someone shouting, I figured that my dad would hear. I decided to take off my headphones just to be safe, and another moment passed. Help me! I'm stuck! I hear it clear as day. So I tell my dad that I hear someone shouting for help, and we shout into the mouth of the valley, trying to communicate with this guy shouting for help who we couldn't even see. I was able to get him to hear me, and we started shouting to each other across the mountain range. I yelled out and I asked if he was all right. His response confused me. Call 911. I'm fine. I'm stuck. So we assumed that it was a hiker who had taken the wrong path and needed help getting back. I started to ascend the peak to intercept my friend as he descended to ask if he had any call signal at the top. Once I reached him, I filled him in on the situation and I found that there was no service at the peak. As frantically walking back to my dad with my phone out in 1 square foot of land, I stop and my phone switches from no signal to showing 0 bars, minimal signal. I'm able to get into contact with 911 and I fill them in on the situation. I then went to our friend and my dad, who had seemed to spot the hiker on the lower face of the mountain. My dad told me to start trekking to the car, and once he and our friend reached the hiker, he would give me a signal whether or not to drive the truck into town for help. The hiker was a young man in his mid-20s. All he had on him was a t-shirt and shorts, no day pack or water, to my knowledge. He had fallen the day before and took quite the tumble. He had been slipping in and out of consciousness for the past 24 hours, which he had thought were 2 or 3 days, apparently. He had both ankles broken, a broken arm, and a broken neck. When the hiker was yelling, I'm fine, he was actually saying, I'm blind, due to a large gash above his eyes, causing both of them to be swollen shut. Luckily, 2 helicopters arrived within an hour or two. One was a standard Medivan chopper, and another was a military helicopter which was equipped with more versatile landing gear. Even luckier was that the only 2 hikers behind us that day was a couple, an EMT and a firefighter. My dad and our friend and the couple working together to properly position the hiker and communicate with the Medivac chopper. They were able to fly him to Durango to receive emergency treatment. The hiker, Dave, ended up making a full recovery and summiting the mountain the next year. So a lot of luck went into this, that it may be one of the only experiences that makes me question if there is a higher power. Receiving cell signal in the middle of nowhere and contacting 911. Hearing Dave over my music when he was blindly yelling for his life. EMT and a firefighter couple hiking behind us. So, a side note, I received a message from the emergency response 911 because they attempted to call me apparently once I left the square foot of signal. I guess the line was still open because I could hear the conversation going down in the planning room. They were discussing whether or not to send a bird out there because the call from me could be a hoax and the weather was picking up to the point they questioned if they could even send out a helicopter. So, all in all, this was just a strange experience, how everything just seemed to fit so perfectly together. And we were able to basically save this guy's life because I don't think he would have survived much longer up there if we hadn't heard him. It was like, something was being I don't know, all kind of put together perfectly. It was just amazing and definitely, I don't know, just weird, really weird. Yeah, that is a pretty interesting story. In a way, it's quite dramatic, really, because it's just amazing how everything was right there on hand. Um, just sort of fit into place like it was all kind of planned. I guess this guy was not meant to die. He was meant to be saved, and it seems to me like somebody was definitely watching over him. To just put everything together like this. It's no coincidence. Certainly doesn't sound like it to me. The bogeyman. One day, myself and a friend were in our car, and it was late at night after a Whataburger run. It was about 3 a.m., and we were just kind of chilling out and just eating in the car, joking around and stuff. Don't ask me why we were up so late. It was kind of sophomore year of college, and we were just pulling an all-nighter for God knows why, just for the hell of it, really. But anyways, we pulled into her apartment complex and we parked perpendicular to the forest surrounding the majority of her complex. As soon as I put my car in park, I felt everything go cold. And I promise you, I felt something in the air. I keep seeing this thing move in the forest out of the corner of my eye, but I think maybe it's just the wind and branches. Finally, I was like, what the hell is that thing? And so I look closer and I see that it's two huge yellow eyes staring out directly into my eyes. How is it that when I finally look harder, we make direct eye contact? This thing was staring at my eyes for a long time. I just know it. So I'm like, oh crap, there's a man in the forest, to my friend. And we both think it's a police officer at first. I don't know why we thought that. But once it showed itself, we knew it was no police officer. But then, as soon as I made eye contact with it, this thing just starts walking out very quickly, coming straight for my car. Keep in mind, my car was on, and so my lights were on. So this thing knew that I would see it coming. It stepped out, and its arms and legs were way too long. It looked like a creature trying to be human or something, but just wasn't quite pulling it off. The proportions and speed of the movements were just all wrong and just off. I believe fully that this wasn't a human with its huge and hollow yellow eyes. It never broke eye contact with me ever. I drove a small Volkswagen Bug at the time, which I know is a small car. But this creature was towering above my car. It was literally the bogeyman. The closer I looked at him, the more scary it got. The more scared I got, the bigger it seemed to grow. Its face was covered by what looked like, and I'm not kidding, a mask of a human face. But the thing's eyes were definitely its own. Finally, I just snapped out of my terror. I reversed out of my spot so fast. By that time, he had made it all the way to the front of my car and was touching the hood. I wish I had just ran it over, honestly. But when I looked back in my rearview mirror to see what was going on, it was standing in the spot I had just been parked in, waving and staring straight into my eyes through the mirror. I don't know what this was. I've heard lots of things. I think it was some kind of demon for sure, but that's just what I'm saying here. I don't know. But I do know that this was not, some guy, dressed up in a costume or something, because I remember, it's just not possible because the way it moved and everything, it couldn't be. And also that horrible feeling that I had in the beginning, that was like something shifted in a really kind of horrible way, and everything just sort of went cold. So I don't know what this was, but it was so terrifying.